Good evening and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. So one of the big issues that's come up of late in Western Toronto, frankly, I think all of Toronto, is this new proposed Highway 413 that was on the books, then off the books, and now looks like it's back on the books again. And I know we've all been focused on COVID-19 and health crises and vaccines and stuff like this, but long-term planning is something that we need to be aware of. And I think it's probably a little bit more of concern right now because I think that we're going to have governments come out with stimulative budgets focused on infrastructure, and this might be one of the proposals they want to get rapidly approved and escalate. And so I thought we'd check in with a gentleman who I really admire. I've interviewed Maurizio Rogato before. He is a principal of Blackthorn Development Corp. Really interesting, smart, opinionated guy. He has been the Director of Development and Planning for Solomar Development Corporation. He was educated in urban and regional planning and city, urban, community, and regional planning at Ryerson University. And in addition, he's a really nice guy. I've enjoyed several glasses of beautiful wine on some patios with this gentleman. He knows what he's talking about, and he's fun to talk with. So Maurizio, welcome to our show. How are you, sir?
Great, Brian, and thanks for the compliments. And I can't wait till we can hit the patio again, and I'm really excited to be back on your show.
I look forward to the patio as much, if not more than so. So tell me just to start with 413. What do you think of it?
Well, look, I think it's something that's been, as you've said, on and off for quite some time now, precisely since the inception of the Places to Grow Act in 2005, 2006. And as you know, the Wynne government put the brakes on it around 2018, and now the Ford government has reactivated quote unquote, the GTA West or the 413, whatever you want to call it. I think it's definitely something to be interested in. I think it's definitely something that as a whole, our society should be fully engaged in. In the GTA, we seem to have a sordid history of undertaking appropriate transportation planning to meet growth needs. You could see that right in the hub of our growth in Toronto, where there's constant discussions around the lack of transit infrastructure and services to meet growth. And the GTA West Corridor truly, I wouldn't say it's strictly a highway, it's a transportation corridor. And I think that our society needs to plan transportation corridors at the same time as we're planning for growth. And if we're going to accommodate growth, as is expected in the study area of the GTA West Corridor, we better get our act straight when it comes to transportation planning, or we'll be met with the current ills that you're seeing regarding transit and the lack of transit.
So this Highway 413 is to go from the intersection in the west of 401 and 407 up north of Brampton and really between Brampton and Caledon all the way over to the Highway 400. That's a huge circle of Western Toronto.
Yep, that's a pretty significant area. And that same area is also the area that's targeted for future growth and to accommodate the population and employment forecasts found in the Ontario government's Places to Grow growth plan. So again, it's an area that's envisioned to see a lot of future growth, a lot of urban expansion. And to accommodate that growth, we need to plan one way or another appropriate transportation systems to move people and to move goods. And I think it's vitally important, and it would be short-sighted to not engage in that planning today.
Even if it disturbs, the green belt and a bunch of beautiful farmland in Caledon?
Absolutely not. Part of the planning would involve to have a fine look at where these transportation services will go, paying careful attention to environmental features, careful attention to our agricultural viability. But again, if you look at the areas surrounding the GTA West Corridor study area, each municipality within that area has envisioned future growth. And we're not talking small numbers here. We're talking over 1 million people to be accommodated over the next 25 years or 30-year planning horizon. And that's a lot of people.
1 million people. So, Mississauga and Brampton together, I think, are only right now 1.3 million.
That's right. So we're growing and we're growing quickly. So the fundamental philosophical question is, can we stop growth? Do we want to grow? If it's inevitable and we realize that we need to grow or that we're going to grow, then we should do so with proper planning. And in my humble opinion, that means transportation planning needs to happen at the same time.
We're chatting tonight with Maurizio Rogato, principal of Blackburn Development. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Maurizio about 413, about the green belt. I think I'm going to ask him about the white belt and the black belt and the brown belt, or whatever other belts that we've got from a planning standpoint, and what he thinks we need to be doing to think about appropriate planning, not only in the Western GTA, but the whole GTA. Stay with us.
Excellent.
Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Maurizio Rogato, who is the principal of Blackburn Development. It's a planning consulting organization here in the Greater Toronto Area. I have spent some time with Maurizio talking about some development plans in the past. He's been kind enough to attend some of the Transit Alliance sessions that we've had. We've talked on the show previously with him about the green belt and some proposals to put developments into the green belt, and he's urged me to consider developments in what he, I think, called the gray or the brown belt. And I'll come back and ask you about that, Maurizio. But tonight I really wanted to focus on the 417, not the 417, the 413 proposed new highway. But maybe before we go to that, Maurizio, tell me a little bit about your background. So you're Ryerson Urban Planning, is that correct?
Yeah. So I'm a graduate out of Ryerson University, which I think is one of the better universities, of course. I've also studied in Scotland at Strathclyde University. I've studied environmental science, urban and regional planning, sociology, and really have a knack for cities and the wonderful places that we call our home.
Why do you have a knack for cities?
I don't know. I just think ever since I was a little boy, I grew up in the city, and so many interesting things happened there. Every corner has something different going on. And so I guess it's the diversity of places. I think it's the stories that come attached with places, the urban legends and the urban myths, and most of them are actually true. So I think it's wonderful to see communities growing and communities and the synergies that come out of communities, right? So I've always enjoyed where I live, and I've always enjoyed the communities that surround our homes and really make up the public spaces. I really think, especially as a child, you can get really lost in that magical place. And Toronto is one of the better cities, in my opinion. It's got fantastic neighborhoods, great open spaces, and a lot of stuff going on. So
now, I think when we chatted before, you talked about, what I would call inner city Toronto, St. Clair area. You talked about, almost Jane Jacobs like organically growing villages, towns, urban areas that have lots of stuff within a walking distance. Is that what we're building today in Toronto, or are we building, suburbs where you got to drive all the time?
Yeah, so I think it's a bit of both. Definitely in the 90s, we saw a lot of suburban growth, and then we saw an intensification era that really came into play with Places to Grow, which is a provincial planning document that sought to intensify urban centers. And I think now with changing trends, and more particularly COVID-19, there seems to be this understood pressure where people may want to look outside the city again. And suburban growth, albeit has slowed in the last 2 decades, has definitely not stopped. And it's definitely still continuing to take on its fair share of growth. Under the growth plan, the majority of growth must be intensification growth, which is within existing urban areas. And that goes beyond Toronto. That includes Mississauga, Brampton, Guelph, all the cities around Toronto. But yeah, I think that, suburban growth will continue to play a role of our new growth. And, are we doing it right? I think there's always room for improvement, of course. But I really do think that the planning that goes on in the Greater Toronto Area is probably one of the better planning methods, and very detailed work goes on there, very careful work. But again, we could always learn from past mistakes and always do better, I think.
So the prior Liberal government had 413 on its books and closed it down. And I guess I had understood the reason why is they didn't want to have this suburban development, particularly if it invaded into farmland and greenbelt, et cetera. And that they wanted the intensification in more urban areas, whether they be Toronto or Mississauga and Brampton, but intensification in the areas that were already built up. Why do you think the Conservative government have reopened the thinking about 413?
Well, first, let's go back to the Liberals' government's decision, which was more not so much about stopping it, but more about trying to expand its review to take a look at other modes of transportation, such as light rail and transit services. And then came in the Ford government, and they've recommenced the environmental assessment work required for the GTA West corridor. And again, in my opinion, that is a very valuable future transportation corridor that is going to be required if we are going to grow. And if we are going to grow beyond our urban limits, this is a real opportunity to finally get it done right? You get the chance to get transportation planning done at the same time as the housing and the employment planning. So in terms of the governments and their decisions and what they do, dare I say, here we go again with the politics of planning. I think we've seen our fair share of fast food politics, and you're seeing it right now with municipal councils across the GTA raising this question of whether or not they should be asking the federal government to come in and have oversight over the GTA West corridor. In my opinion, the federal government should have always been involved in city building in urban areas across our country. So I welcome their participation. But this idea that you're going to stop a transportation corridor and not plan it, I think is counterproductive if we are going to continue to grow as a society. And if we've accepted that the population in the GTA is going to grow dramatically as shown in the growth plan's population employment forecast, surely everyone would agree with me that we would be better off to do proper transportation planning. And that could mean transit within the corridor. That can mean all sorts of modes of transportation. So, I understand people's reluctancy. I understand advocacy groups who really just see it as another highway. I hope that's not the case. I hope we've learned from our history, and transit is definitely something that belongs as part of the transportation language, if you will, to accommodate our future growth.
Okay, so let's spend just a couple of minutes on the actual routing of the proposed highway, the potential routing of the proposed highway. This would be north of all of the built-up area of Brampton.
Correct.
And actually into the southern area of Caledon. I presume it doesn't invade, the beautiful Forks of the Credit area, because it doesn't go that far north, but it is in area that's primarily farmland today. And when I think about Brampton, it ends at Mayfield Road or whatever it is, doesn't it? And so this really is proposed to be north of that. And so therefore, what you're suggesting is there's going to be a whole bunch of development into Caledon, north
Absolutely.
of proposed 413.
Yeah, so Caledon, in their ongoing conformity exercises to the provincial growth plan, they have accepted enormous amounts of growth north of Brampton, and that growth is going to be through a planning practice which is known as settlement boundary expansions or urban expansions. And again, that is to accommodate the expected population growth that the region is to see. And if we are going to accommodate that growth and accept that growth in that reality, we really, really need to get the infrastructure right. It's as a planner, it's kind of frustrating because something is up in Ontario when it comes to transportation planning. We seem to lack the ability to move that forward, be it the transit agenda, be it the roads and maintenance agenda. So the GTA West corridor really and truly represents an opportunity to have a fulsome discussion about how do we accommodate this growth, and how do we get people and goods moving in an efficient way, in an environmentally friendly way, of course. And I would agree with the advocacy groups that definitely doesn't mean just a highway. That means several modes of transportation, and notably, I would say transit. Transit is definitely the future. It's how we can efficiently move people in and out of regions and urban areas. So absolutely. And if you look at, not only Caledon, even Vaughan, it goes through areas of Vaughan that are known as new community areas. These areas were recently expanded beyond Vaughan's urban boundary. They're to accommodate thousands of people. And if you look at what's coming in the future to the year 2051, and the provincial growth projections come down from the federal immigration statistics, we're growing. We're a growing region. And again, not to sound redundant, but if we're going to grow, we better grow right. And we better make sure that when we take on this growth, we're also planning the very vitally important infrastructure, or we'll find ourselves in a deficit for transit like we do right now, I would say, in Toronto. It's getting a little bit better, but you've heard countless stories about the challenges with transit in Toronto and transit expansion.
Yeah, no, unbelievable challenges of transit expansion. But
yeah.
Coming back, so this big, I presume it would be a major divided, 4, if not 8-lane freeway through farmland at the north end of the city. Now, I had heard at one point in time, and this may have been about 10 years ago, that there was some contemplation that Caledon would go from like 50,000 people to 500,000 people over time, like a 10 times increase. And if that kind of increase in population was anticipated, that for sure would necessitate some sort of dramatic increase in transit. So you said that there's 1 million people, extra people coming into the Mississauga, Brampton, Caledon area. Where do you think that 1 million people are going to go? Are they all going to go around 413 at the north end?
Well, the hope is that the majority of the new growth will be accommodated through our ongoing efforts to intensify existing urban centers. But the reality is not all that growth can be accommodated within urban centers. And the other reality coupled with that is there continues to be extreme pressure for what I would call, even the Canadian dream of a backyard and a traditional housing option.
I understand pools are under huge demand, and you can't get one built.
That's right. Try calling a pool contractor these days, right? So I do think that as we grow, there will be continued pressure, and unfortunately, our agricultural lands are part of the equation. Now, I will say that north of Brampton, a lot of the agricultural lands are fragmented. However, in planning, there's always gives and takes. And one of the gives definitely is the lands north of Brampton are likely agriculture, and they will likely be converted into urban lands as Caledon, Vaughan, Milton, all these areas just continue to accept population and the realities that we.
Do you think it's actually possible to have Caledon go from 50,000 people to 500,000, a 10 times increase?
I don't know about the precise precisions and numbers, but I will tell you, yes, absolutely. I think that Caledon has a significant role to play in the future growth of the GTA. It's long been known, it's the area between the Greenbelt and between the urban settlement areas. It's unofficially known as the White Belt. And this area has seen countless pressure to accommodate growth. And in fact, there's active planning going on right now as I speak to bring in these areas into an urban setting. And again, if we're going to accommodate all this new, not just housing, but employment growth as well, the question becomes, what is it going to look like? What have we learned from it? And I think one of the clear takeaways is that we can't grow without appropriate infrastructure. And so, I think the most vital infrastructure is transportation.
And so I agree. We got to have the infrastructure. But when you think about the 407 as an example, along it on both sides, particularly at the major intersections with 401, with 410, with 427, with 400, with 404, is major industrial commercial activity as well. So do you believe that not only are we going to have residential along this 413, but we're going to have a huge amount of commercial development as well?
Absolutely. One of the rules in planning, just a general rule, is that you locate your employment uses adjacent to infrastructure corridors, transportation corridors, such as highways, just to efficiently move goods. And there's a lot of synergies that happen there with just-in-time production and deliveries. But I believe there'll be a mix of uses. I believe that not one rule is good for everywhere. You'll see there's also a lot of existing residential communities that surround the highways, both in the United States, in Europe, and in Canada. But definitely we'll try to locate a lot of the employment uses surrounding future corridors. But I go back to the importance of ensuring that this particular corridor not only accommodates the vehicle, but accommodates people and accommodates other modes of transportation. I think have we learned enough to make sure that happens? So, it's unfortunate to see that politics has again entered the sphere here, and we get a steady diet of fast food politics. And what I mean by that is really easy decision making that would just have you stop the whole thing and pretend that the growth isn't coming. But I don't think that that's a realistic option. I think that we really need to come together. I really think that our political leaders that we've elected and trusted to come together should really take a look at this as an opportunity and a means to really ensure that the transit agenda is put to the forefront. And if you look at it that way, boy, is it exciting, because we get to plan actively new communities with transit in mind as a first thought and not as an afterthought.
Well, at one point in time, there was a proposal to to have a lot more GO trains that go up through that area. I think there was one going in through Bolton at one point in time that didn't get approved or hasn't gone ahead, and have that transit be all day two-way. And certainly that's been the proposal for Mississauga as well as Brampton on both the Mississauga Milton line, as well as the line that goes from Brampton through all the way to
That's right. And if you think about it, the LRT, right? Look at the LRT. Mississauga did a great job with the LRT securing that. I don't know where Brampton is, but I know they were working on it as well. But these transit services, they'll be better utilized if they're connected to an interregional network, and we really need that. And I think, again, if Caledon and these areas north of in the northern part of the GTA weren't growing, then that's a different discussion. But the reality is they are growing. They're in fact growing expeditiously. So if they are, we really need to do a great job. So I think the Ford government was correct in recommencing the environmental assessment. But however, I think that there needs to be an expansion of thinking when it comes to what that corridor will actually accommodate and what it will actually entail. And my hope is, as a planner, that transit is a major part of it.
So I understand that when they built the 407, they actually left a right-of-way for rail. And there was a proposal to take the rail that currently goes from Milton to the Lisgar station at the northwest corner of Mississauga, then goes down through Mississauga, but to propose to take it along the 407 all the way to Bramalea. But they didn't build the bridges to allow trains to go through. And the cost of rebuilding all those bridges and moving the train track is astronomical. So yeah, you're right that we can plan it, but we got to actually move ahead and build it at some point in time, or at least plan some of the building to accommodate it. Like I said, bridges that could accommodate train tracks.
Absolutely, and you'll see I'm getting a chuckle because it's such a sad comedy. I don't know what it is. We've got some of the greatest technology in our society. We're so advanced, but for some reason, when it comes to transportation planning, we're either riddled with fear or mired in politics in the mud. I really think that planning is definitely something that needs to happen. And of course, implementation of plans is vitally important, because there's no point in planning if you're not implementing anything. So I do think that, as part of the ongoing debate and as part of the ongoing, hopefully, recommencement of an environmental assessment, whether it be federally overseen or not, we would take a hard look at, again, doing the proper transit planning and obviously acquiring the land needed for that corridor, and putting in place detailed infrastructure plans. So when the growth does come, we don't have this hodgepodge of holes in the network because we just can't seem to get our act right. So
what are we talking about this? Is this 5 years away or 10 years away or 50 years away?
Well, it depends who you ask. So the Ford government, they'd have it come in tomorrow. They've been pretty aggressive on the growth agenda. But recently, I think community groups, I've just got this flyer in the mail, stop the 413, right? So there's a lot of emotions attached to it. And with an election around the corner, almost around the corner, it got a lot of politicians listening. I think we need leadership here. I think we need everybody to come together. I think it's great that community groups are interested and passionate. And I think it's great that members of council and members of provincial parliament are listening, and hopefully federal parliament. But again, in my opinion, we're one community, notwithstanding our borders. And if we're going to accommodate all this future growth, I don't think anybody's going to disagree with me to say we really need innovative transportation planning. And boy, oh boy, is this another kick at the can to try to get it right? And everyone's watching, right? So I would just sort of hope everyone comes together and instead of this yes or no conversation that's happening now, which I coin as fast food politics, I really think we could get some fine dining around transportation planning.
Oh, I wish you were right. I fear you're wrong. Anyway, we're chatting tonight with Maurizio Rogato, principal of Blackburn Development. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Maurizio. And I'm going to ask him about the 407, how it should be financed. This 413, should it be financed in a private-public partnership or publicly? And what type of urban environment or suburban environment we should be building in these new communities that are going to be opening up in the northwest end of the city. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. We're chatting tonight about really transportation, primarily highway transportation, ringing Toronto, and the proposed potential 413 and the environmental assessment that the Ford government has reopened. And our guest is Maurizio Rogato, who is the principal of Blackburn Development. He's an urban planner, city builder, runs his own development planning advisory company, and enjoys great wine and good Italian food. And so it's a pleasure to chat with you, Maurizio. So let me ask you a couple of questions. So when we built the 407, initially, I think it went from, Mississauga 401 to the 400. And then ultimately, it went all the way from Burlington to connect up with the 401 at Whitby through the, whatever that is, the 412 or something like that goes down from the 407 too. Is this 413 going to go, similarly all the way around Toronto? Is there going to be an eastern expansion of it at some point in time, probably?
It may expand. Right now, as you've noted, it's planned to go all the way from Vaughan to Milton, across the northern end of the GTA. But who knows what the future holds? And right now, in fact, the discussion is to terminate even that thinking, and to have the federal government come in and put in some oversight and reanalyze whether or not we need transportation corridor.
Who's saying to bring in the federal government?
So a lot of municipal councils have now voted to request the federal government step in and conduct their own environmental assessment or have some oversight with the provincial environmental assessment. And that's been encouraged by a lot of advocacy that's come to local government, which is where we express our opinions best, from various groups who've been challenging this idea of having a highway, and rightfully so. They're concerned about impacts on environmental lands. They're concerned about impacts on the infamous green belt and whatnot. So that's where it's coming from. Again, part of that discussion, in my opinion, isn't just the transportation corridor. It's the growth around it that's already moving forward. Long range planning has been going on in this area, being north of Brampton, in what's coined as the White Belt, since at least 2005.
And this is why, because they don't trust the conservative provincial government to make the correct environmental assessment and want to have liberal federal government oversight to it?
I think trust is always something that's definitely at the table when it comes to anyone, really, and especially in government. But I think what's really happening is the Ford government has put the pedal on here, and communities are now starting to recognize that this is coming. And it could be some Johnny-come-latelys, some people that weren't aware of it. But I think it's rooted in deep concern. I think people are very concerned about what this corridor is going to mean for our environment, for our air quality, and the list goes on and on. But again, this wasn't overnight. This has been studied for quite some time now, definitely over a decade of time. And again, there's a lot of growth that's definitely coming. So I think we're better off having a conversation about what is proper for the area in terms of transportation planning. And I think that the literature and the experiences have taught us that transit is really what the key to success.
Okay, so if we took the same amount of money, which has got to be billions of dollars of highway construction and property purchases and interchanges and stuff like that, and invested it in transit, wouldn't we have a better urban environment?
I would think so. I don't know if anyone disagrees, but I, as a planner, absolutely would think so. And I think it's really the mesh of society. It's what keeps us connected, and it's what avoids gridlock, avoids a lot of the maintenance issues we see with rights of ways. Now, we'd be foolish to think that our reality is not upon us, meaning today, the majority of people still commute with automobiles. But if we're going to change that equation or have any chance at doing that, it's transit. The answer is transit, transit, transit. I can't say it enough.
Well, and the counter to that is every single development that it seems that people propose to take place in urban centers, and I've seen this all over Mississauga, Toronto, etc. The local community objects to it. And so, getting this intensification within the urban environment with greater density seems like it's the right thing to do, but it's impossible to achieve because you've always got people objecting to it. And then the local ward councillors, give in to the local residents because that's who their electors are.
Well, hopefully not all of them, but yeah. So I think our public process is definitely something that could be seen as a challenge. I don't see it that way. I think everyone's got an opinion, and that opinion is welcome. But I think it's part of what goes into the basket of decision making. So to your point, if decisions are being driven by sentiment, I would say that's inappropriate, and I've coined it fast food politics. But if decisions are being made wisely, and people are listening to real concerns, and while also listening to the quote unquote experts, I think the outcome of that is something that we all can wrap our arms around.
Okay, but you're living in an idyllic world. The reality is this fast food politics is probably regrettably the world that we live in. And sentiment is against development and intensification everywhere that it's proposed in the existing urban area. And then similarly, it's against this new 413 highway. And if you're right, the million people are coming, it's just going to lead to chaos and congestion.
Well, I think that's where our leaders really need to step up. I really do. And I'm the last person to tell them what to do. You know, they've got a very challenging job ahead of them. But I do think that definitely they need to step up. But I also think that it's not everywhere. But I would agree with you that the majority sentiment towards growth is we don't want it here, or opposition to intensification plans within communities. But I think if we do really good planning and we really demonstrate that you could grow an existing community whilst continuing to retain the essence of that community, the character of that community, and I do think it's possible. I think you.
How do you maintain the essence of the community?
Well, I think you start by looking at the surrounding neighborhood character, and I think when you're looking at development and you're looking at planning development, you need to pay careful attention to massing and proportions. And there's a lot of tools in our toolkit that we could use to soften the impact of new development, whether it be scale, massing, view corridors.
What do you mean massing?
So when you're looking at intensifying, let's say, an old site in an existing community, a lot of developers want to maximize their profit, understandably, and usually that means just putting a lot of concrete in one place with a lot of height or a lot of floors. That's not always the answer. I think what we need to look at is what is appropriate for that site. And that site will still accommodate growth. It's not that it won't, but maybe it won't accommodate as much growth as the market demands. So there's this fine balance between societal demands and market demand. And it's really great. It's really exciting for me because it's like a socioeconomic sphere. And it, if you get that right, magic happens. And I think we've got some great examples in Toronto where that's happened around Yorkville, for example. I think they've still preserved streetscapes along Yorkville, along Bloor Street, just great stuff happening. And even in the center of the city, Liberty Village is a great example as well, I think. And everyone will have an opinion, so people may disagree with that. But one thing that's the truth, and it's going to definitely not go away, is Canada, and in particular Southern Canada, is an attractive place. We even got Americans running away now, allegedly coming here. So people want to live here. And they want to join us.
Well, we've got 1 million people coming into just Western GTA.
Right.
And I heard a statistic at one point in time that the city of Montreal is moving to the GTA in the next 10 years. That size of a population increase, which sort of.
And I've got 3 kids, and I'd like to see them maybe
being able to buy a house. So I had Jennifer Keesmaat, former chief planner for the city of Toronto, on my show a little while ago. And she said that this orientation to the long commute where everyone was living out in the burbs and commuting to downtown Toronto is over. And it was over either because of COVID-19 or because people are getting tired of the long commute. What we got to do is move to an era where we live and work and play is all within 15 minutes. And we have complete communities in these smaller urban nodes within the whole urban environment. What do you think of that?
So, talk about idealism. I think that's ideal. But I don't think it's reality. I think the objectives are excellent. I think the 15-minute rule is definitely something we need to look at and definitely strive toward. But again, the reality is that habits continue to be largely automobile-oriented living, unfortunately. There are people who continue to commute longer than they should to their workplace or to their home. But I do think Jennifer's right in terms of what we should aspire to and what we should plan towards. And that is to try to concentrate growth with services nearby and transit nearby. And if we do that and we get these little wins along the way, I think the ultimate result would be a cohesive community that's got these principles embedded. And we can't do it overnight. Challenges are going to continue. For example, I think with the recent pandemic, the thinking around some kitchen tables is, we don't want to be in the city anymore. We want to leave the city. There's this knee-jerk reaction. I don't think that's very sustainable, and I think Jennifer would agree with me. But we need to plan ideal objectives while keeping in mind the reality. And if we can't turn a completely blind eye to the automobile. It continues to be the prominent mode of transportation. We need to start to change minds. And the way we do that is by making alternative services such as transit readily available. So people will look out and say, right now, if you're driving to the city, you may be aware of the transit services that are there, but you may not want to use them because you may not think they're reliable.
Or in a public health COVID environment, safe.
Correct. So if we can really have a strong agenda around transit and how we make transit better and how we make it more efficient and how we make it safer, I think we're all better off. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, please finish.
No, and I just think naturally what will happen is, someone will say, I can drive 2 hours into the city, or I'm hearing that the transit's working really well and I can get there in half an hour. And I think they're going to take full advantage of that. The other thing we need to keep in mind is our climate. We have a pretty hardcore climate. We've got a pretty hardcore winter. So transit needs to keep climate in mind and making sure people are comfortable. So, transit is by its very essence a service, and service can only work if it's good service. So I really think we need a lot of learning there. And I really do think that the federal government, like so in the States, really needs to step up and really needs to recognize, and I think they've been trying, but we need some real leadership at the helm. And we need someone to really say, look, we're a growing society. We are the future. And we go to Europe. We love those places. And they've got transit that just rock and rolls, man. It's just great transit.
A couple of things. Transit usage is down, supposedly something like 80%, at least revenue is down by 80%. And so a lot of people during COVID-19 are either working from home or if they're not working from home, are choosing not to use transit. And what's happened in China, even as they've reopened, is car ownership is up hugely as people don't feel necessarily safe being crammed into transit. In the Go Transit system today, I think the statistic is 97% of all of the trips either start or end at Union Station. And so it's completely focused on getting people to or from, downtown. Do you think that's the right system? And is it sustainable in a COVID environment or even a post-COVID environment where people are going to be, I think, for a while, a little bit more public health conscious?
Yeah, so I do think that COVID's presented significant challenges to transit sustainability. And it's the obvious, right? Physical distancing is difficult to do on transit. We've tried our best. There's a lot of discouragement around that. A lot of folks would rather do as they're told, which is stay home. So I think it's a difficult time for transit, but I also think that we can have a sustainable transit system. And I think that it has to go beyond our current urban boundaries. It's been a long time now. We need a regional transit system that connects Pearson, connects the suburbs into the city, because these suburbs are going to intensify. You're seeing it everywhere now. If you take a drive north of the 401, boy, oh boy, there's high rises popping up everywhere. And there's a lot of people living in these high rises and they need transit. So I think, our network needs to expand. I think we need to fill the gaps. I think we need to have cohesiveness. And then when looking at the really difficult question of usability and things like the pandemic, we may see the end of this pandemic, but we may see another one. So we learn from that. So how do we get people on transit in a cohesive way, feeling safe being on transit?
I had a conversation with Michael Spaziani. He's another urban planner. You may know him. And he was saying that whether because of COVID or just general trends anyway, that he thought the trend was going to be away from a concentration downtown to different nodes around the city, whether they be exurbs or just, so he was, we were talking about, Yonge and St. Clair, Yonge and Shepherd, maybe even North Yonge and Finch, Mississauga Square One, other areas that become urban environments in what we would have historically thought of a more suburban location, rather than all the focus on downtown. And he thought that was because of number one, commutes, number two, maybe COVID, number three, maybe housing prices, maybe some of Jennifer Keesmaat's, live and work closer together. But he thought that too much of our planning had historically been focused all on downtown, particularly in transit, but also in balance of planning. And that yet people wanted to live, work in Port Credit intensified areas, Square One intensified areas, Yonge and Shepherd intensified areas, Scarborough Town Center intensified areas. What do you think of that?
I think it's absolutely true. I think seeing is believing. And if you go through communities outside of Toronto, you'll note that they're all intensifying and rather rapidly. This is really what's interesting to me. Just in my backyard in Vaughan, we've got the Vaughan Metropolitan Center now, 2 subway stations, enormous intensification growth happening there. In Mississauga, look at the growth that's happened there. Boy, oh boy, you go back 30 years, you never think that downtown Mississauga would look the way it does today. So I think it's true. And I think it all comes down to evolution of place. And I think this idea of sterile places is just a non-starter. People move in, and people make it home, and then people change their home. And I think that's going to continue to happen. And I think we need to be better prepared to understand that suburban communities will one day become diverse urban communities, or they'll stagnate and die and face urban blight. And I think that that's what you're seeing. And I think it's definitely a condition of a healthy housing market, although I would say an overheated market as well, with clamped up supply allegedly. And you also need to remember they're all different approval authorities at the planning end. So you've got City of Mississauga being an approval authority, City of Toronto being its own approval authority, City of Vaughan, for example. So every lower tier municipality and upper tier has their own planning decisions to make, and the ministry at the provincial level oversees it all. And I think, I got to say something. I think the Ford government in particular has taken on the planning agenda in a rather aggressive way. And they've been met with criticism over it, but surely taking on the agenda alone for me is something that I think is great. Planning is finally finding its way into the mainstream. I think my kids know about it now. They talk about how important it is to get it done right. I think there's a lot of hope in future generations. They've learned from the mistakes we've made. So what I would like to see is all these intensified communities that are happening outside of Toronto connect with Toronto. And I forget when it was, but I think it was in the early millennium or in the 90s even, with the Greater Transportation Services Board, where they were trying to get this cohesive regional transit system. And we still haven't done it. We still, I have visitors who come, obviously not during the pandemic, but prior to the pandemic, they would fly to Toronto and they just couldn't believe that connecting Pearson to the city and Vaughan is almost like, you got to get on this bus and you got to get off this bus and you need to pay this fare because, this is not the same transit company. We really, really need to get beyond that. And honestly, sooner the better.
So Maurizio, you've been a planner. You say that you've got this thing for cities. Has planning actually been helpful? You think about Jane Jacobs, who described the organically sort of created towns as the best. The areas like Port Credit, like Blurris Village, like the beaches, like Kitsilano, like the North End in Boston, etc. And yet planners then got involved and started segmenting industrial uses from commercial uses, from retail uses, from residential uses, and created suburban sprawl and zoning and all this kind of stuff. I interviewed a guy who wrote a book called The Missing Middle, and he said planners have destroyed our cities because they've made it impossible for us to build the type of housing that people really want to live in. What do you think about that?
So look, I think the planning is an art and a science, and obviously it's not always done properly. But you referenced Jane Jacobs. Her impact was undertaken through a planning process. So our process is one that's very robust. It invites significant amount of public participation, and I think that at the end of it all, we come out with something that we call communities, or we call the results of planning, let's say. So it's not done by one practice, so not by one profession. So urban planners, we've got our part in that process, and that's to recommend what we think is best based on sound science and based on knowledge and design things. But it doesn't always come out to be what's preferable, or dare I say, workable. There's situations even where infrastructure fails and people's lives are lost. So at the turn of the century, when we started planning, we had this segregation mentality, right? We need to keep people away from industrial uses because they're going to get sick, and we can't have them living nearby one another. And as we learn that we can coexist. We learn that mixed use development is more efficient if done properly and with health in mind. So what do I think about that? I think that it's partly true. We can't be perfect. We're not perfect. But I would say to you that planning happens all the time, even organically. It's innate in our species as humans. We like to sort things out. We like to really take a look at things hard and try to organize them the best we can. Do we do a perfect job? No. But I think it's really cool. And what I always like to think about when I say, well, is it good? Take an airplane ride and look out a window. And it's just remarkable what you see. I'm a long fan of painters and paint and great art. And I think that our urban view from up above is really artistic. We've got these beautiful cities that are grid patterns and these lights and whatnot. So it's done something good, and it's definitely accommodated populations. And I think it was last year, for the first time ever, that urban populations are finally starting to dominate and take precedence. And I think that's where we're headed as a world, where our urban centers are going to continue to be populated. So we need planning, and we need to get better at it. Absolutely, absolutely.
Maurizio Rogato, principal of Blackburn Development Corporation. Thank you so much for joining us and talking about Highway 413. I guess where I come out after all of this discussion is that if we're going to add this million people in the Western GTA, we need something, whether it be dramatic increase in highway transportation or transit or both, and we better plan for it. And so therefore ruling it out for what Maurizio calls fast food political reasons right now is the wrong thing to do. What we need is a good plan to try to figure it out. Maurizio, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Brian. Take care.